Hi everyone, my name is Diego Albino Rodriguez Contreras, and this is
Erin. And this is our podcast called Love is the Remedy. Thank you for joining us today. We're so happy to be here.
We have a special guest.
We have a very special guest today. This is Jesse
Dvorak.
And we're so thankful that you came on the show today because we're really, I'm interested personally in hearing your thoughts about our topic, which is love. Mm-hmm. And Diego and I like to talk a little bit about where it all started, where you all started. So how do we know each other?
Well, before we start there, let's just talk to our audience and let them know this is our first guest.
This is our first
We're not sure if we're going to release this in order, but this is our first guest.
Yeah.
We're really happy to have Jesse. We're grateful for your presence, for your time.
Honored to have you.
Honored to have you here. Jesse's flown in all the way from LA for this project.
Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So Jesse, yeah, thanks for having you.
That's all I have.
So tell me, first of all, what do you do in LA? You live in LA, so what do you do there?
Filmmaker, musician, and I've been doing life coaching as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you lived in LA?
7 years now.
7 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
I think 7, yeah.
7?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So how do we know each other?
I was born into your family.
So I'm going to tell you the story about how Jesse and I know each other. So Jesse is my younger brother. Sometimes it seems like he's more mature and therefore a little older than me. It's not true.
When I first met these two, I thought Jesse was the older brother. I think you remember me asking you that. And I was like, are you the older brother? And you gave me this look and you're like, no, not at all.
Anyway, so I met Jesse. I remember the first time I met Jesse, and it was at the hospital. I was 4.5 years old, and I remember Mom coming out, walking down the hallway with her new baby. And I just remember being so excited to meet you. And from that moment on, I took it upon myself to be a very good big sister. Mm-hmm. And always wanted to take care, make sure Jesse's good, make sure he's happy. And I'm sure there were things that I did when you were younger that you didn't like.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I had the whole dressing me up and putting makeup on me fit to that equation.
Yes, I used to dress him up like a girl and put makeup on him. Yeah. He was like my little doll, but he was so cute. And then I realized as we got older that maybe that wouldn't be you weren't interested in that. And I should treat you like something, like a human. But over the last many years in our adult life, we've become very good friends. We're very close, and I'm thankful for your friendship, and I'm thankful for having you in my life. So talk to me. So we grew up in the same household, but I'm really interested in hearing about your experience in our own home because, you are 4.5 years younger, and they say even though you live in the same household with your siblings, everybody's experience is a little bit different. So tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in our home. Did you move around as much as I did? I don't even know.
Yeah, I feel like I moved around a lot. It's interesting living in LA because whenever you meet somebody, the first question they ask you is, what do you do and where are you from? Because nobody's from there. Mm-hmm. So I never really have a great answer because I just moved around so much. I feel like you and Josh had more of a home.
My older brother.
Than I did. Because I was born in Lincoln, but then moved to Texas. I came back and then moved away right as I hit adolescence to Colorado. Mm-hmm. And then again in high school, I moved again to Minnesota.
And you moved to Minnesota your junior year in high school, right?
Yeah.
So you moved from Nebraska to Colorado Springs junior high, right?
Yeah.
What grade was that?
That was 8th grade.
8th grade. So right in the middle of junior high, and then you had another major move right in the middle of high school.
Middle of junior year.
So I've always been curious about if that impacted you or if you cared, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, I'm sure 8th grade sucks for most people, but that was particularly crappy because I didn't know anybody. And it was my first time actually at a public school too, so that was like a whole new experience.
Because you went to a private school in Nebraska. Yeah, small, private.
So just this is chaos.
It was a lot.
And I was getting made fun of a bunch. And, where we grew up, our family had a lot of ties, so people kind of knew who we were, and I was like nobody. So that was not a fun experience, but then by the time junior year came around, I was actually kind of excited about it. Just kind of a new start and getting out. I didn't really ever like Colorado a whole lot.
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah.
Oh, and here you are.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us.
It's beautiful though. But then when I went to Minnesota, it was kind of a fun experience for me at that point.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't really feel like I knew my screenwriter buddy of mine. I'd always have this conversation in LA of like, I don't understand I'm from, and he was really into like my whole like mysterious vibe, and he said, and he came up with this line. He's like, you say you're a little bit from everywhere and a little bit from nowhere. So I try to like.
That's how you feel about yourself?
Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah.
And that's just kind of how it played out in your life.
Yeah.
So when did you start getting into making music?
I was 15 when, well, I mean, we grew up playing piano and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then I started writing though when mom and dad bought me a keyboard, and I just started like spend a lot of time in my room just making music. And I actually started playing shows pretty quickly. I started like at 15, 16.
You did?
Yeah.
You were playing shows that young?
Yeah.
I remember just being so proud of my brother. He's he's a musician in a band. It's so cool. But no, I've always been like your biggest fan, or one of them at least. And so I was always thought that was really great. We do come from a musical family. I'm not talented musically, but mom and dad are, and our older brother was a DJ. So it's in our fam. So I guess that my next kind of curiosity. What you would have said?
I'm only curious just about Minnesota. Did you go to Minneapolis, St. Paul? Where were you at?
No, that was a move to a small town. And that probably helped a little bit too, because I was new and exciting. So like a small town, there was only one school, everyone wanted to meet me. And so it was just like.
Oh, so you Insta fame.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, so you went from the Springs,
Yeah.
larger metropolitan area in Colorado, not as large as Denver, but still metropolitan,
Right.
to then a smaller town in high school.
Yeah.
And you preferred that.
I did. It has once in small towns, like once you're done with high school, it's pretty much a kind of a dead end kind of a feeling. So I was able to get out of there after a year after high school, and I joined a different band, and that's why I moved to New Mexico. So, but
you got to tour around with the band. It was a decent.
Yeah.
Yeah, they toured, and you went over Europe, and.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
I grew up in Montrose, is small.
Yeah.
Yeah, so very small. I loved a lot of high school. Yeah. I loved a lot of the high school experience because it was smaller. So I can empathize or relate to that.
So go
It was
ahead.
weird because, like, I don't know, like, I felt like Maggie in The Simpsons.
Yes, you were. We are the Simpsons. If anybody cares to know about our family, just look at the Simpsons.
And I've
You were
always kind
Maggie.
of thought like I was the forgotten child in a lot of ways. Like,
See, and I just always
Yeah.
thought you were the quiet one.
yeah, and I got that too.
And we were all of us were just chaos.
Yeah.
You what?
That's just the funniest thing to say. I thought you were the quiet one. Like, that is what the forgotten one. That's the perfect way to give a label. Oh, you're just the quiet one.
You were the quiet one. I was-
Also the forgotten one. It's like both are true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you angry or bitter about that? What is?
No, I wouldn't say I'm angry or bitter. It was kind of, I think it's probably, it probably starts as you learn and grow up, you kind of learn some things about yourself. I'm like, maybe I really wasn't, I mean, yeah, I'm naturally quiet, but maybe there was like some defense mechanisms happening as well.
Coping.
Yeah, I'm just like, there was a lot of loud and I would go hide. And so.
Because we were loud.
Yeah, and I would see, either my older brother a lot of times getting in trouble, and so I was like, I don't want that. So I'm just.
I felt the same way. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't want to cause any problems. He's causing so many.
Yeah.
But we love
so
him
kinda, I
so
think
much.
it probably even created then like some passive aggressive tendencies which aren't great either.
Yeah. All right.
What was it like growing up with Aaron? I have to ask. I think all of our listeners are curious to know what it was like to grow up with Aaron.
What's it like?
Yeah, what was that experience like? And you can talk about any part of it. It doesn't have to be a particular part. I'm just curious.
Well, I think you've always been passionate, and and I remember big.
That makes me feel good.
Yeah, I remember big. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of emotions with boys and sports, and I know that, and so like I think that's great. You have that passion, and I have one recollection of Dad holding you in a parking lot because I think you just gotten broken up with, and you were bawling your eyes out.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember this.
Yeah.
When was
Jesse
that?
does.
Yeah.
This is good for me to hear. When was
Yeah.
that?
High school. You were in high school.
I didn't think I did it in high school.
Well, here we have contrary
I
information.
don't remember.
This is brilliant. I'm glad we're doing this interview.
But I mean, again, I feel like you guys were kind of a tandem. and I was off in the distance.
Like the four of us, our older brother. And,
Yeah, well, you two especially because you were in high school together.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
was like, way back.
I think that's probably easy to do, is just kind of get consumed with your life, like when you're in high school, and then
Yeah.
forget
for
about the
sure.
younger ones.
Yeah, but then I think
No one's blaming you, Aaron.
I wasn't trying to attack you.
Yeah, no one's attacking you.
I'm sorry, it wasn't
My
great,
point
Jesse.
is, like, when I was younger, I didn't feel like we had like a great, we weren't like super tight or anything like that.
No.
But as when we got older, especially when you moved to Colorado, we had sometimes do
We played
playful
balloon.
things
We
together.
played balloon volleyball a
Yeah.
lot together in our living room.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah, and then obviously, we'll get to this later, I suppose, of when I went through divorce. I think that's when we really
Became close.
really close. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's transition to that.
It's a big jump.
So well, it's okay.
Okay, I'm just curious before you jump in there.
What?
Albuquerque. I just feel like that's an important touchstone in this story is what happens in Albuquerque, because I think that I can track the narrative. So you're, just to restate what I heard here, you're growing up in a family, it's very loud, you've got a passionate older sister, beautiful older sister who's dating in high school.
I'm not. I wasn't.
has breakups that her dad is talking to her about, an older brother who's got a lot of energy as well, and a dad, I've been told, who was on radio, right? So he was a part of this entertainment world already. And so that makes sense. You're Colorado Springs, metropolitan area, smaller town, probably feel good about yourself. You've got sort of an identity. Albuquerque happens. What happens in Albuquerque?
Well, I think that's my first sort of like departure from home. I'm on my own. I moved all the way across the country from Minnesota to New Mexico just on my own. I had a crappy car, just packed it full and somehow made
Because
it.
you went there because of the band.
Right, I was joining a band, and it was, it's a proper escape plan to get out of a small town where it's like didn't see what was happening there.
Proper escape plan. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
And this is a cool chance to be in a band and just kind of figure out things. So I was working at like a CD store or a call center and part-time, and then we'd go on tour. We'd record some stuff. So it was like only 3 years of my life.
Why Albuquerque?
Well, that's where the band was based out of. Already. So they're already established. They were looking for someone to come be part of it. They just do new release, CD release.
Back in the CD days.
Do you want to talk about the band? Because I think it was a big band, right?
Not really.
Okay.
No, it's called the Echoing Green. It was a synth pop band.
They were kind of in the Christian world. They were
We
known.
had
You
a
got-
very
you-
we had a very wonderful, devoted fan base. I wouldn't say it was huge, but they were really
You played at
wonderful
festival.
people.
You
They were-
played at
yeah.
festivals and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to have those memories and experiences. Some really pretty some stories of like shows that were not glamorous, to say the least. I think one of the least glamorous would be us playing at an amusement park right beneath the roller coaster in the middle of the day. So
No.
In the middle of the day?
Yeah.
Did you have any vomit come on? That's what I think underneath a roller coaster. Oh man, what about the big? Okay, so we hit that's our floor. Yeah, what's our ceiling? What's the high?
The high was Salt Lake City, and those Mormons love their new wave and 80s type of music. And so we were kind of that vein. And we opened for Alphaville, which they had never played in the United States when they were really popular. They had that song Forever Young.
Oh, you opened for them?
Yes, we opened for
Wow.
Yeah. Forever
You
Young.
that's such a great
So
song.
that was, we opened for them, and that was their German synth pop band. And so, there was a bunch of people, like 2,000-3,000 people in a warehouse. That was pretty good.
Whoa, that's a huge audience. I've always wanted to be a rock star. What was it like to have that many people be like? It must have been pretty life-giving.
It was. I mean, it is an amazing energy for sure, and it's fun. And the music we were playing with that was like very. I mean, it feel good. It was kind of feel good music, very melodic and high energy. So it was just kind of like a good time.
Yeah. I think of Ryan Gosling in La La Land when he's playing with, the big band. Yeah. And you played the keyboards.
I was playing keyboards back then. Yeah.
He writes too
Mm-hmm.
and sings now.
Yeah. Now I do most of just acoustic guitar and singer-songwriter stuff.
So if people want to hear your music before now,
Blood Nebraska. So
Blood Nebraska
Yeah.
on Spotify.
all the things.
All the platforms.
All the
Yeah, Blood
places.
Nebraska.
we'll put links so people can check it out.
Let's do
And
that.
yeah, I also want to listen to the other music too.
The old
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, the old stuff. Yeah.
I used to listen to it a lot. Defend Your Joy.
Yeah.
Every girl and boy, everyone. I used to listen to that CD all the time. Yeah.
Well,
I
it's
loved
cool
It.
experience for me because like I actually did listen to the band before I joined, so it's
Yeah,
pretty
so it's cool.
that
Oh, wow.
I get to join with people I like. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really neat experience. Okay, now let's talk about the divorce.
Okay,
It's like,
no, let's talk about the marriage.
okay,
So
okay.
you got married when you were young. How old were you when you got married?
I think I was 22, 23.
22, 23.
Yeah.
And you were living where when you got married? Minnesota?
Yeah, so it's actually like it was part of that transition from I was already decided to leave the band and go to the Twin Cities.
Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yeah, to
So wait, you're in Albuquerque,
yeah.
and now we're gonna go back to Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, I had some good
parents had
friends in
moved there
there.
by
My
then.
parents were in the suburbs.
Brother.
My brother was in St. Paul. I've heard good things about just like the music culture there, and so I was already. I didn't feel like I was like made to be a keyboard player in a band. Like it was a great experience, but I was always writing my own stuff, and so I was like, oh, I'm going to do this my own thing. Moved to the Twin Cities, and then in that process is when, actually the very last tour is when I had met my now ex-wife, and so there was a transition period of me like we kind of had a long distance thing while I moved to Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you met her, you started dating.
Mm-hmm.
You eventually got married. I remember your wedding.
Was she a groupie?
No,
Okay.
yeah.
Jesus.
I like the traditional dude. Was she a fan of the band? I'm
putting it that
way. I'm putting
it that
way. Was she a fan of you? Did she see you as a music
Not really, no.
Or what was her experience?
She's
with you?
in the
No.
scene.
Yeah.
She's around, you know.
Yeah,
She's-
all of her friends are musicians. It's like not that impressive.
So for her, it wasn't, so she didn't approach you like, oh my gosh,
Oh no.
there's this keyboard player in this cool band. She was just like, I'm a musician, he's a musician, we're on. Is that right?
She's a fan. She promoted some shows.
she wasn't a musician. She was
Yeah.
more of a promoter.
Oh,
kind of
promoter,
like
okay.
in the scene, you know.
She was in the scene as a promoter, okay. I just
Yeah.
think that kind of stuff is interesting for people to know where sometimes those things play a role in how people relate.
Oh, that's
interesting.
Yeah, the first way, what the power dynamic was like.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I
yeah.
was curious.
So, anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
So you got married.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were in love. I remember you guys were really sweet. And, I remember your wedding.
Yeah.
And so, what did you do for what? Like, what did you quit the band after that? But then, what did you do
I was
for
doing
work?
my own. Oh, my work. I was just doing. I was in social services actually. for
Oh,
a
that's
while.
right. You did
Yeah.
that. That's right.
So helping adults kind of. They're pretty high functioning, but had disabilities. So I
Yeah,
could,
you
like,
took
just kinda
care of
help with them,
people. That was. I remember that.
Whoa, what? You can't just gloss over that. How does one become a musician and take care of people? That's not my typical musician friends. If they're listening, I'm sorry, but that's not what you usually do. They're not very focused on other people. They're focused on themselves and their art. So that's a pretty big departure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I did that for I can't remember how many years, but quite a few. And then I ended up getting an office job, so that was even less of a musician.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
you
was
were
like
doing that to be able to have some stability.
Right. Yeah. I was
and-
trying to. Yeah, I was trying to just like, oh, this is what a good husband is supposed to do, and take care of all this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think. I don't know. That's interesting. I was just kind of like, oh, here's a thing to do. I'll give it a shot. And
But I think it maybe has to do with your parents, no? Your parents are really caring from what I've heard from. Yeah.
that's interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah, and my brother for sure too. Yeah.
He's a nurse now.
Yeah.
Our older brother.
It was. I mean, it was interesting. It was pretty intense. I think it
You have
trained
good
me
stories.
for a lot.
You have a lot of really good
for,
stories. What was that guy's name? Oh, we're not naming names.
No,
there. There was this
yeah.
one client you had that you have some great stories with.
Yeah, I mean, these are people with pretty severe mental disabilities, and so I think I learned how to like just kind of weather a storm and remain calm when even things are violence is threatened towards you. So yeah, but I don't know. It was. In some ways it was easy. In some ways, it was sort of like energetically taxing. But it's like I'm not necessarily doing hard labor or anything like that, so I could still go home and try to work on some music or have a life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were married, and at some point though, so you were working just a desk job for many years, like 5 years or
Yeah.
whatever. And you'd mentioned a minute ago that you were kind of just doing what you thought you were supposed to do as a husband. You were
Yeah.
just trying to get stability and do all the. Where did that idea come from in your life of that when you get married you do these things?
Well, I don't know. I think there's always a lot of times a wrestling of being practical and thoughtful. And even though people recognize I was creative a lot of my life, it was like, okay, but that's a hobby, you know? And so you gotta learn how to be responsible and make money, which, like, when I moved to LA, I realized, like, what a crock that is. Like, you can be creative and make a lot of money.
It can be very lucrative, but I think it's a very common narrative that is the arts are not. In fact, I had the same issue before I majored in film. Was I didn't think you could make a living. I did some research, and yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
So at what point what happened? Like, tell me about like when you started to stir, because you went to film school eventually.
Well, that was later. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like I think I put so much focus on, okay, well, this is marriage, and I definitely have a Christian upbringing, and it's almost like this mindset of there's something so mystical about it.
About marriage?
Yeah, that it's like, I don't know, that's like the cure for everything in a sense. So
That's what I think.
I love this interview because I've told Aaron this. A lot of our understanding of relationships and people come from the family of origin and the environment that you're in, and of course we change it. It's all malleable, though. That's our building blocks. So it sounds like but you were doing the right thing, so to speak. You were taking care of your wife, being responsible. You're still pursuing a hobby, but really it wasn't your hobby; it was your passion. But seems like you were forced to put it into the hobby box. Was that something that you did, your wife did, society did, the man?
Well, I think what happened is really early on, like, challenges were pretty apparent in the relationship. And it was, looking back, I'm like, wow, how much compatibility really was there?
And it's hard to know that when you get married at
Yeah,
22 because you don't
yeah.
know yourself yet.
Totally. And
Yeah.
so when real problems start happening pretty quickly, it just kind of be like, okay, I need to put out these fires, and this is where everything needs to, be tended to. And so I'd still do music and stuff, and I had a band, a couple bands in Minnesota that were doing okay, but that had its own, own progression where bandmates were just not reliable, and I was kind of managing so many personnels and stuff. I just got exhausted with that. But with that is, in the meantime, so I kind of dropped with music, but then didn't have anything really that I was resonating with for like my own just sort of creative energies. And meanwhile, we're having quite a bit of dysfunction, or just the way we're relating probably was not getting anywhere close to meeting of either of our needs. And I look back and I realize, I think, I was a pretty terrible husband. Not to say I didn't have many qualities, but I think to be like just really honest, to take responsibility for probably I'd say like 85% of the issues
Really?
were mine.
Really? Are you sure?
Well, I think it's interesting to hear.
That's
Well, I just can't help
fair. I
but
think
put.
that's fair.
Okay, well, I can't help but put myself in the shoes of the person who's not here to tell her story.
Right.
So, obviously, I don't know her, have never met her. All we're really talking about just what we've learned through our life experience.
Yeah.
At the same time, I know about storytelling, and in storytelling, people are always not happy when they're not there to tell their own side of the story. So it sounds like you're really trying to take into account
I am.
that, and that sounds
Yeah.
like that's what you're doing, and that's really great of you to try to do that.
And in the meantime, like, I think I've been, certain filters have come off my eyes in years to be like, you know what, that was like, sure, I was young. I didn't know better. I was trying to do my best, but it just isn't a lot of the right responses. And to my credit, when things were going wrong, I did reach out. I did try to get help, but I feel like a lot of the help I was given, the people I was trusting, were not really truly healing and helpful voices.
It's hard to find.
Yeah, and so I was trying, really trying to do the best I could, but not getting the tools to make my way through. And then in that process too, where I was at this point, later on working in a cubicle, just going in, and it's this heavy, dark winters, and eventually I'm like, I just need to do something. I have no idea what. So I went to school, found film, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really exciting. I love this, and I'd always been interested in film. So went ahead and did it, got a 2-year degree, and in that process too, I mean, things really kind of unraveled with that relationship. So it was, I guess that's kind of what led me to eventually going to LA. And then pretty much right when I moved to LA, that's when like it just kind of all fell apart. But it wasn't like moving to LA is when the divorce happened. It's when it all sort of, everything came out, and years of unhealthy relationship just sort of like kind of found its breaking point.
It's so interesting. I just see such similarities with our stories because, you're saying I was reaching out, I was trying to get help. This is what I did when I was married as well. I was reaching out, I was trying to get help, and I could never find it. Nothing worked. I think I said that in our other interview when you interviewed me. It's like nothing helped. I couldn't figure it out. After 13 years, I couldn't figure it out. And then we relocated to another city, and then everything fell apart at the relocation. So it's very similar. And then I've also heard our dad say the same thing. I was trying to get help and nothing worked.
Yeah.
And we're not going to tell his story, but I'm just saying it's interesting for me to hear you say the same thing, me say the same thing, him say the same thing. And I think we all have better tools in our life now and better kind of, we've gone on our own healing journeys. So I just wanted to note that's really interesting and how that is similar in our storyline.
I have a couple of more logistics questions. How long were you married for? And when you say you didn't find the tools, I'm just curious what tools you sought out. Not that I'm judging, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I'd reach out to, both just like people in the church that we're part of a church with, and then also therapists. And I don't know if this is a newsflash, but there are a lot of crappy therapists.
Yeah.
And I was not getting like real help. And I'd go, and I remember this one guy, I was like, at this point in the relationship, it was just sort of like, I'm a problem, I just need to go get fixed. And so I go see this guy, and he just kind of asked me a few questions, write me a prescription. All right. And I was like, well, what do I do? How do I change? And it's just like, maybe
have some medicine, have some medication.
Yeah. Oh, you're depressed. Okay.
But there was no conversation about anything else.
Yeah, like how do you develop the personal tools to do something different, to think differently, to feel differently, to reframe a conversation so that I can engage with it in a way that's healthier. And then the people, church-wise, it was just kind of like, you haven't repented enough. Your faith is lacking. It's just kind of like trite throwing Bible verses at you sort of a thing.
My same experience. Yeah. It was like, what's wrong with you? Just read the Bible, go to Bible study. You should be fine.
Yeah.
That was exactly my...
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
How long were you married for?
Like technically 12 years. By the time that 12-year came around, it was like we had not been together all year, but like.
Wow, that's so profound, Jesse. Thanks for sharing all that. That's incredible to reflect on that. And I think that the experience of a Christian person is really important to articulate in that way. We live in a time with how politicized religion has become. And when we first started this podcast and video project, we never thought it would become so focused on our faith, though in terms of how Aaron and I have navigated our own lives, faith comes up again and again. I was atheist for a long time and I became a Christian, a follower of Christ when I was about 24, 25, having been Catholic my whole life. And so I think what you're bringing up are these dilemmas that are very common. However, a lot of people don't bring them up or talk about them. And we're not trying to bash the Christian faith, we're just saying, hey, this was the experience within that world, within what was happening, and it sounds like you were able to find help eventually, which is really important that you were able to do that. I know I've asked you this before, but just for the sake of this particular conversation, are you still in communication with your previous partner?
No, not at all. No, she's I'm not saying this in a disparaging way. She's a much more black and white person than I feel I would be. Where I always kind of wanted that like debrief, but that it also kind of points to some of the issues that we had. But like when she was done with me, she's pretty much done. So that's been part of what I've had to work through myself is I have done my best to express remorse and my regret for my role in the failing and the ways that I hurt her. And I know I've made that effort and tried to do it without expectation because she deserves that. Yet the human part of me would love just to be acknowledged and to say, you know what, Jesse, I'm really sorry for things I did. But I likely won't get that. So for me, that's part of me just sort of trying to learn to love and just accept that and realize I don't necessarily have to have that. But so you can see that's a bit of a...
It would be a beautiful gift.
But I can relate. I've gone to Al-Anon before. Al-Anon is for the Friends and Family of Alcoholics. And my family has dealt with alcoholism. And that was, in the meeting that I went to, that was the big, and I've mentioned this to Aaron before, the takeaway was that little slip of paper I got was, you can forgive someone without them asking for forgiveness. And for me, that's really important for at the time, the relationship I was trying to get back, and I needed that because the person had stopped talking to me abruptly. And it like really messed me up psychologically, spiritually, and it was like a loop in a program that just kept trying to be fixed, and that forgiveness, I can forgive them without them asking, helped me to forgive her, and that calmed. And then it also was like, I gotta forgive mom and dad, and they're never gonna apologize for some of these things that they don't necessarily, they probably on some level know that isn't great. And the other big takeaway during that phase of my life was I was praying, I was like, God, I need some way to get through this anger and frustration, and I'm forgiving, what else? And in this, randomly I'm driving through Wyoming, this radio thing pops up and it says, you can forgive and not have to reconcile. So I can forgive someone and not have to introduce them back in my life. And somehow I needed to hear that to be like, okay, I don't expect reconciliation, but I can forgive for my own sake, for my own well-being. And that sort of helped me to let go of that desire of having to be back together with this person or forgive them for what they had done. Eventually they would come back into my life and she was surprised. She was like, oh, I thought you hated me. At a point I had maybe, but I think through that, forgiving her and understanding that I didn't have to have reconciliation, that really helped me out. So it just makes me think of your experience a little bit. It's not actually, apples to apples, but that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, and I think that one of the theme of our podcast is the journey towards unconditional love, and I, always want it to be just this beautiful experience and this this amazing, step after step after step of learning. And that is a little bit of how I approach life. Even in all the heartache moments, people who know me know that I'm still like, oh, and then I learned this and it's amazing, and it's wonderful to experience this. But it's the journey to unconditional love is incredibly difficult, incredibly hard. It's this moment that you said, or this moment you're sharing, which is that it would be beautiful for them to be thinking the same way and thinking of you. What would be kind for Jesse? What would help him heal and be able to move on? I'm not going back, but would this conversation be helpful to him? And not everybody does that. And so then people like you, someone like you or Diego, or
like most often than not,
people don't, but people who are sort of, I believe, on a spiritual journey, who are tuned into a spiritual path. And I'm not saying that those people who don't do this aren't. I don't want to say that. But it seems like you have a high calling and expectation of yourself, and you do, and I do as well. And I know how this probably could sound, and I don't know how to.
I know what you're saying. You're not being judgmental to the people who aren't doing this work. It's just
no,
like,
and not saying that they're not on a spiritual journey,
right.
but
you're using unconditional love to, in a way, take the high road, for lack of a better term.
I don't like that word.
Yeah, I know.
It's not about taking the high road. It's about actually then having to access God's unconditional love and the journey of going there.
Yeah.
Because the only way you can, not have to live in this need for a reconciling conversation, that is, to me, the answer for you, for any of us, like in that situation, is really accessing God's unconditional love. And what does that mean for you? And then how do we offer that to someone else who isn't giving us what we need?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like I remind myself, like, I have to live with myself. So who am I going to be? Who do I want to live with, in a sense? And so if I can be a forgiving person and try not to like need something for that completion of my forgiveness, then like I'm just kind of operating within the way I want to live. And so I can be free.
Regardless of how everybody else is, this is how I'm choosing to be.
Yeah.
Because this is how I want to be.
And it does hurt. It is bothersome to not get that conversation.
Bothersome.
I know I've experienced it. It aches. And from a guy's standpoint, it's really challenging because the way I remember, in my situation, I was like, it wouldn't be that hard for that person to pick up the phone and talk. We could just have a 15-minute debrief. Yeah. And I had reached out to her. Finally, she's like, you can't reach out to me anymore. And I was like, wow, okay. And, since we're friends, but during that time, it was really odd to have that aggressive stance put on me. Because I was like, I don't think I did anything wrong, and I can't even clear my name. And me attempting to clear my name creates more problems. So I really just had to stuff it and accept. And it feels like you have to accept all the accusations as well. And I don't know if that was your experience, but that was my experience. And that was a hard burden to bear. I had to be like, well, what did I do wrong? What did I not do wrong? And you can't have that dialogue with that person to distinguish it. You're just like, well, I feel trapped. I know I did something wrong. I don't know if I did all those things. Or I'm remorseful of all of it. I wish that hadn't happened. And then you really need to kind of step back. And I agree that sometimes, like in my experience, the people I talked to in the church weren't that helpful all the time. They were like kind of telling you, well, this is what you're supposed to do. And or they'd be like, just forget it, let it go. And I was like, okay, that's also not that helpful. It was really outside of the church, where it was like going to Al-Anon or going to coaching courses or just trying to read about it and understand this thing that helped me a little bit. But yeah, it was disappointing sometimes not to get that. It's not to say that that's going to be the experience for everyone going to a church. There's probably someone listening to this being like, oh, I've got the perfect church. And I believe that person. I just didn't experience it at the time. And at the time that I was going to church, the church I was attending was falling apart and actually closed. So it was also like really bad timing on I was like, what is life? Yeah. Yeah, it was.
No wonder. Everybody was busy. Everybody was occupied with other things.
I think for me, what's been, I've tried to learn more is like actual empathy. And so it's something that I can try to do in the relationship I'm in now, but also to really empathize, to like feel as my ex would have felt, and for her to possibly engage with me just feels painful. It brings up like a lot of lies that I told, and so if I can empathize with that, like I can understand it and not feel like I need to take more. And then again, in a new relationship of just like trying to, again, it's not easy to do, but like feel into who they are as though I am them. And of course, if they're going to have an issue with me, then it's like, well, of course that makes sense. That's how you feel. And I can try to interpret through your life how I'm coming across to, just to be more loving if that's what I need to do. But in some ways that's kind of helped me exercise sort of a compassion, even though there's just not going to be this kind of conversation to have, or just be like, oh, okay, yeah.
Well,
there's so many questions I have. Do you want to take a break?
No, we can. This actually would be a natural pause.
Yeah, this would be a natural
so let's
pause.
take a natural pause.
Okay.
'Cause,
Commercial break.
commercial
A little commercial break.
This is Love is the Remedy.
Love's the Remedy with the Olivino Rodriguez Contreras.
And
Aquí.
Aaron. Oh.
No,
And
aquí.
Aaron, Mikhail Dvorak, and Jesse.
Dvorak. We should probably explain that.
We should explain it. Let's explain it really quick.
Please.
Go ahead and explain our names.
So our family lineage came here from Czech Republic, and Dvorak is the name.
Dvorak.
Dvorak.
I went there, I know.
Okay, and
Wow. I just feel like I just saw years of you two together. That was a beautiful moment. I hope people who listen to the podcast watch the video to just get this dynamic. That was so beautiful.
yeah, for whatever reason, it was Grandpa Joe or his dad?
I don't know, but when they came
changed-
over,
it's like a trendy thing that we want to be American, so they somehow Dvorak.
it's something
sounds more-
over at Ellis Island. They changed it. There was some Americanizing it or
Yeah,
something.
it
I
was
don't know.
supposed to Americanize it,
So they changed it to Dvorak.
which is just awful.
It's
and I
awful.
got made fun of in
I
high
got called
school.
dork all through.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's an easy one.
But I'm like, well, it's not the name, so I changed it back for myself.
So you go by when you introduce yourself, you say, and
Jesse
you go by
Dvorak.
Dvorak,
Yeah.
but you don't put the marks on it.
Well, I mean,
Upsilon? Is that what it is?
yeah,
There's like a couple little marks above
yeah,
the A and
little
the
triangle thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
to,
wow.
to add the like
The
accents.
accent.
Yeah.
The j- yeah. So you go by Dvorak,
Mm-hmm.
and I go by Dvorak, or I sometimes try to be like Dvorak, and you say
Mikhail Dvorak.
He says Dvorak.
Dvorak, yeah.
But anyway,
I think,
so
well, I think it's important
feel
that the
silly.
composers know it, but I think
Dvorak is that composer.
yeah, it's important to
Yeah,
be connected
yeah.
to your lineage. I
Well,
think
we're
it's
not.
important. No. But hear me out. I would, and I don't know, but I assume you're probably about 3 generations out from immigration, maybe.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very common American experience. I'm first generation, and so sure, it's like, well, I'm pretty connected, but I think that being connected to your roots helps understand your family, your
So
unit,
much.
understanding of how you perceive relationships,
Yeah.
because there's all this history that you can go back to original sin, but this history more in your family that helps understand why you are the way that you are. So I think a lot of people, that's why they're interested in their lineage, because they try to understand what are the stories that affected my life.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool that you've gone back, and I think it's also neat that you're connected to the composer.
No,
That's
we're not.
neat. Okay. Well, you know what? The last name is the same as the composer, which is
I
a
thought
common,
it
which is
is
a
the
common
same.
name.
It's a very common name.
Which is well,
Which I
yeah.
found out also. We thought we were so special. And then
But
I
you know
went
what?
to visit.
It's indicative of at least the Czech Republic.
It is.
At
it
least,
is.
yeah,
And
just like
not Eastern European is it's fine.
yeah,
I'm good. I'm
you're
good.
connected to Eastern
Yeah.
Europe, which I think is fantastic.
It makes me understand the way I look and
Yeah.
the way you look and all this
Yeah.
stuff. So anyway, that's the crazy.
That's the last name. I love
Yeah.
it. That's such
So-
a neat story.
So we're gonna pause here. We'll come back for part 2 of our interview with my brother Jesse. This is Love is the Remedy. Thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, share, heart, comment.
Tell us what you think about our outfits.
Our outfits. So Diego, you had a question for Jesse. We finished off. We were kind of talking about some things,
Yep.
which I don't remember because we just had a break. Anyway, what question did you have for Jesse?
Well, the question I have, this is a question that I love to ask people all the time. What would you tell your younger self if you could speak right now from your present self into the past?
Which younger self, though? That's my question.
I would say... the
Let him
person-
figure out what younger self would you like to say something to.
Oh man. Well, it's interesting. I mean, immediately the thought it comes to mind of like 23-year-old just married version of me.
So what would you tell him?
Don't be so hard on yourself. Like, I'd just be like, buddy, it's okay.
Why were you so hard on yourself?
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know why, but I've been thinking about this recently because I've been much more about just presence. And so much of my life, I've thought of like I have to. I'm incomplete, therefore that means I have to fix. And if I don't, then I don't know, there's some sort of like terrible consequence to pay, rather than accepting and being able to love myself into maturation, into developing. And my mindset so much of life has been like, try to reach out to and be the person that I feel like is never quite possible to be. And so I'm just always, oh, I just can't quite get there, can't quite get there. Rather than being like, well, there's something in me right now that does want to heal and does want to improve, and that exists right now. I don't have to always find the destination of that complete version of me. I can sort of receive and be that part of me right now and live it.
Be complete in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
Mm.
So you're saying like, don't wait to be perfect almost?
Yeah, maybe.
Or whole.
Yeah.
Perfect is a word that,
Yeah.
I don't know, is the goal, but I think the goal is like whole,
Even.
functional,
Yeah.
present.
I think for us, like self-development types, it's like, when I'm going to be whole,
Is that a buzzword,
Or
I guess?
self-actualize.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just seems like how many books
Because-
we're going to read.
yeah,
and what
how
courses
many-
can we go to?
Yeah, because I think I've learned recently and realized recently, like it's probably just going to take our whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be, it's a whole life. There's not like getting to some point and then you can relax because
Yeah, I got it.
I got it.
Nirvana.
I think,
Or the work is complete.
or the work is
Yeah.
done, because as soon as we think that, then there's seems to always be something new to ask us to grow and learn from.
Yeah. And I don't think that means it makes you passive. It doesn't
No.
have to. Because for me, it actually can do the opposite. Like I feel more paralyzed when I feel so much pressure and burden and just sort of demand. But I don't know, I guess to answer your question, it'd just be sort of like, it's okay, just have some compassion and enjoy a lot of the stuff that's happening. And I still, honestly, that's like still something I would be struggling with.
Working through,
Yeah.
understanding.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about the future relationship. The last question I'll ask.
Okay.
We were talking about this a little bit yesterday. Knowing what you know now about your arc, your story arc, would you want to go through that experience again? And I ask because I'm someone who recently got out of a relationship, and on our agenda as a couple was to get married. And for me, I couldn't, and I can't speak on her behalf, but I couldn't commit to that given where we were at as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's a wonderful human being. At the same time, a thought creeped in my mind. What if we would have gotten married anyway? Even there was a possibility of it ending poorly.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should have done it anyway.
Mm.
Because divorces happen anyway.
Yeah.
Obviously I didn't do it, but that was a thought I had. So to that point, would you go through that experience again that you went through, or not?
So I don't want to ever go through divorce again, but I think it's the nature of life and maturing and becoming adult to have a death of self, and that was the requirement I think that I needed in order to, Richard Rohr calls it like the second half of life, for me to begin that. And so I was living, it was worth it in the sense of like it was required for me to break apart the paradigms that were not going to work. And in that sense, it's a blessing. Obviously, I don't want that to sound callous and like that, we have another person.
There's
who
real
had a lot of
pain. There's real heartache.
But
yeah.
it's also kind of to kind of step a larger view, and like that is how we as humans do develop, and it kind of allows for the person to become aware and to, in a sense, become themselves. The false self has to die, and that's when I look back, I just see like a very confused person who believed things, but those paradigms were just completely non-functional, and in order for that to change, I had to go through that divorce. And there's also something, I think, I do have a friend that actually mentioned this, like not everyone gets that experience of him falling in love. Not everyone has, that experience of being married. And so that's kind of, I can appreciate that I've had that experience, even though when I look back, like that's a decade that feels kind of lost to me, that feels just dark and heavy. Mm-hmm. It's a decade of my life. In my 20s, you're supposed to, have a lot of energy and excitement. Mm. But I think part of me is like learning how to see that, feel that, and honor it, and just be, this is life. And so I wouldn't say, yeah, go ahead and get married if you plan on getting divorced. I wouldn't do that.
Good job, Diego. Good call.
Because I think we all have our own whatever vessel of dying that I had certain romanticism or certain beliefs that just I channeled all this into, and it fell apart. So that was a requirement for me to kind of learn that those were broken systems I was basing so much of my life upon.
So this leads me to something that I'm particularly interested in, which is what happens when the picture perfect idea that we're told, we're growing up in church, is supposed to be. We have parents that are still married. They got married when they're 18 and 19. Yeah. They're still married and still doing work. Yeah. They haven't stopped. They've had, we'll get them on. I'm going to bring them on, and they'll each one tell their own story eventually. But that, like work through it. Mm. Not just them, but in our society, our culture we grew up in. So one of the things I'm passionate about asking and exploring is, well, what happens when you've done your best to fit that paradigm and it doesn't work? What? For me, it turned into depression, suicidal ideation, constant survival mode for years and years and years. My wake up was when my first son was born, my only son, searching for what is true, breaking out of this paradigm that I'm trying to work and it doesn't. So then what comes next once you're like all the template that we are living in shatters?
That's a great question. I remember feeling as though, I also want to pause for a moment. So when the S hit the fan and I was in LA and very low, Aaron, you flew out in a day's notice because I was in a really bad spot. And that gesture, just to let you know again that who you are, may have saved my life. So I was depleted. I was completely broken and shattered because of these things that had fallen apart. And I remember feeling like I was just like these basic like minerals and elements, and that's like all I like, just kind of sifting in some loose water, and like I didn't like maybe there's like compassion in there somewhere. Maybe there's like something about like I like hiking. Yeah. And so it's like figuring out like what do I like, and it can be the most simple thing, but you kind of build off of that. Like, oh, I like burritos. I really like burritos.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And even for me, like I went to film school, and then I came to LA with like, vision to be a filmmaker, and then I was like, I don't even know if I like film. And then like eventually I started having ideas again, and I think, okay, I am creative. I do actually want to do this. It's not just, I don't think this is just ego based. This is like me. And so I think you just kind of try to become aware and find something in tune with your heart that just feels good. And whatever provides some life and ability to keep living and create hope and create energy so that you just have life again. And it's going to be different for different people because we all have those different pieces, but I just remember that I just think I don't know what I am, but I just feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't believe you're saying that because I completely relate. I had the same experience when I was going through things early in my marriage. I was seeking counseling and things like that. And I remember, I'm a journal keeper. And so I have all the journals from that time. And I just remember writing, I don't even know if I like the color red.
Nah.
Do I like birds? And it's like, I can't believe you had the same experience. But that was when I was younger. And I had the same thing. And it's just a matter of really figuring out not what the external picture is anymore, but what is the internal picture and what am I made up internally so that I can have an internal structure that is safe, that is doesn't have to change depending on the environment that I'm in.
Yeah.
And that takes time and energy and effort. But I remember getting the call and flying out, and I was like, why is nobody going out? Okay, I'm going, So that was a special time for me too. And so anything else about that?
It's a beautiful moment. Outside, it's just a beautiful moment. You're able to be there for your brother the way that you were. That's really cool. And that you were also, Jesse, willing to accept that help. I think even sometimes when people are hurt and they need help, they don't accept it. And so it just goes to show the kind of relationship you two had, that you're able to provide it and you're willing to receive it. That's a really beautiful experience.
Yeah. And the fact
I wouldn't not let him, though. I was like, we're doing this. Here's a thing. Hold this. We're going to do this.
No, I understand. It's just that all the same, I have a lot of siblings. I don't know that all of them have been willing to receive help when I've been wanting to give it.
I see.
And
That's
it's
a good
beautiful that Jesse was open and receptive to that. That's really cool. And that you were willing to give it as well. I think that's just wonderful. It's just cool to hear about that. It gives me hope. Lifts up my spirits.
Yay.
Yeah, I think in my life experience, I haven't had that. I've always craved that. So it's cool to hear that someone has had that magic in their lives.
Aww.
Yeah.
So sweet.
Yeah.
So from that moment, you began to piece your life together, and I'm interested to know what did you learn in the years after that about yourself? How did you start to put yourself together? And then what did you learn? Yeah, what did you start to learn in this new broken open kind of field of opportunity of figuring out life again?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just a lot more flexibility within my faith, in just being like, I'm going to feel free to, I'm just interested in this. I can ask these questions. There's, not that I wasn't, inquisitive and questioning before, but starting pursuing more artistic things, even like within film, like the style of film, finding a certain voice of my own within my artistry.